So I want to cover this case about this judge that it's made national news about Judge William Carter. Now I'm going to tell you something. I am the person who prays fervently on a regular basis for God. I beg him. I beg him. I mean, I cried. I begged God to please remove all corrupt judges. Okay, that's who I am, right? I have this, like, oh my gosh, can't stand corruption, right? But what I really, really cannot stand is when you target people for corruption, and while doing so, you are corrupt. They do corrupt things. So this is a perfect example of that. And this is really sad because I can explain why a lot of people don't understand how corruption just is so prevalent and so successful a lot of times in this country. When you have prosecutors and police and they work together, they hide evidence, they destroy evidence, they withhold exculpatory evidence, they have federal judges giving passes to DAs and legislators won't pass laws to make it criminal for prosecutors who knowingly use, withholding of evidence and doing things, misconduct, corruption to get convictions. The police and the prosecutors are the ones who people need to focus on for corruption. And that is because when police and prosecutors work together to arrest, charge falsely, and take people's lives and their freedom from them, okay, the judges are the neutral party that sit on the bench and they say whether or not something, they can have an effect that can lead to convictions. If a judge is just unfair and a judge will, be favorable to the police or favorable to the prosecution, more often than not, it will lead to a conviction that is of an innocent person. If they don't allow something for the defense or they allow something that's not proper for the prosecution, and when a judge won't play along, to help prosecutors get convictions under their belt and the police to be corrupt, they get rid of them. A lot of times, they will target an official. Now, this judge is not innocent. I want to say up front, he did do things that was unprofessional. Okay? But what he did, you can tell, and this is why I researched this case, because I don't know if it's just intuitive. I don't know if it's a gift of discernment. But there are times where I can just listen, read, and watch and read. And I'm just like, okay, I'm going to predict what I'm going to find when I research this. And 9 times out of 10, I'm right. What I predicted when I listened to this encounter, I predicted there was corruption. That when I would research this case and I research what happened to this judge and I research how things were written, one, there's going to be lies told on this judge. There's going to be lies protecting this officer from the things that he did, and there's going to be omissions. And boy, was I right. So what I'm going to show in this video, so get a cup of coffee or a drink of water, because I'm going to show you the detailed charges that a prosecutor wrote up. And the prosecutor, that's a problem in itself, that a prosecutor should recuse himself, because a prosecutor is affected by this judge. So he's not an impartial person. But, every state has their standards of how they process things. So when a judge commits something that's improper, they are held to a very high standard when it comes to judicial ethics. So if they're doing something outside their judicial duties that they find destroys the integrity of the court system, okay, they will file charges, not like criminal charges, but like charges that could remove him from the bench, that could cause him to lose his license, issue fines, a various assortment of things that they could do with the judge. Now, this judge has never had any complaints before. He's never had any kind of disciplines. There's been, but what was sad is that you could tell that this guy, when you read his body language, he's not a racist. And that's one thing. I believe they used this officer. This is my personal opinion. I believe that no matter what this guy was doing, his phone wasn't even the issue, okay? But no matter what he was doing, they already planned to remove this judge. They had this guy pull him over and say things to him and provoke him. And this officer committed a crime. And hear what I mean. When you say something and you accuse somebody of doing something, even though you're not writing something down under penalty of perjury, when you make an accusation, you tell somebody that they have committed a crime. Like when he accuses somebody of doing something that they have not done, that could potentially be written as a charge, and you have done so falsely, that is a crime. In most states, I know in my state that I live in, if you falsely accuse somebody of a crime, it is a crime if you knowingly say so and lie. So not only did this officer falsely, what I'm getting ready to show you what he said that was a crime, and most people will just like not even pick up on what he just did, what I'm getting ready to show you, and just think of it as minor. But let me show you how it's not minor. So this guy pulls this judge over, and that what it was, really, I don't even believe it was what he did. It didn't matter what this guy was doing. He could have been doing nothing with this phone. This guy was going to get pulled over this day. It didn't matter what he was doing. It does not matter what he was doing. There was going to find a reason to pull this guy over. Okay. And this guy, he did kind of have an attitude. Okay. He should not have said, I'm a judge, that, you don't encounter a police officer pulling you over and mentioning you're a judge. That was wrong. Okay. But the police are corrupt in this town. Can you imagine having to be the person when you go through a trial? The police will file charges on somebody. The prosecutor will, go through the process of a trial or plea or whatever. But it's the judge that ultimately sends them to prison. So can you imagine if you are a judge and you're sitting in a position where you just know there's corruption. But what can you do? What can you do but sit there and be neutral and go through the facts and the discovery and all the things and cases? But when you know the cops are crooked and you're down and you know the prosecutor is crooked, you have two choices. You either play the game or you're a target. And that's how it is. That's reality. So this guy, he says what happens. And I've had this happen to me. If you put your phone in your pocket, whatever you do, don't put it in your left pocket when you're driving, but no matter which pocket you put it in, it could slide out. So his phone slid out and went down into his side door there. So he reached down and he picked it up and then he put it over. He had it held in his right hand and his hand was on his steering wheel. Now, the state law, it's not a crime. If his mouth was moving and the cop saw that he's so he's got his hands on his steering wheel, is what the cop saw, and admitted that's what he saw. He didn't say, oh, but I saw your mouth was moving, so it looked like you were talking, because he could have had it on speakerphone, because you're not allowed, even in the statute in the state, you can't even have it on speakerphone. Now, it says that if it's on handheld, okay? So like if you have Bluetooth, you can be on the phone and use Bluetooth, which to me, that's still a distraction. But nonetheless, he did not violate the statute. He had the phone in his hand, which if his mouth was moving and it looked like he was engaging in a conversation, that would be different. But holding it in his hand was not a violation, which is why he did not get a citation. So when the officer comes up to him and he's like, he looks defensive and he acts defensive, because to me, I just feel like he knew he was a target. I think he knew they wanted this man off the bench. And that is what they did. They didn't succeed, but he did get disciplined, but he's still on the bench, thankfully. Okay. But he just has this attitude that cops here are crooked. So here's what he did. He tells this cop, well, look, I wasn't doing anything. He said, I had my phone in my hand and my hand was on the steering wheel. So he holds his hand up, he puts the phone in his hand, and he demonstrates to him how he had it in his hand and he was not using it, which he knows that's what would require him to get a ticket. So the cop, instead of saying, okay, well, you're right. Now, in fairness to the cop, he had absolute reasonable suspicion to pull this guy over. Okay, so he had that right to pull him over. And so to say he pulled him over for nothing is wrong. Because don't hold your phone in your hand. Don't do that. You're giving cops probable cause to pull you over. It doesn't matter if you're not on it. Okay? Let's say you've got your navigator on, which I've done this before. I have done this before. I use my navigator, and, you know, if I may, like, set it up on my, like, thing over here. I might hold it in my hand. I might need to look at it. But I'm not talking on the phone, and I'm not texting, you know, and navigator apps, I haven't found a statute that says navigator apps are not allowed, you know, but why would you have navigator apps if you can't use them? Anyways, but not to get on the side track there. So it wasn't on, and he told me, he said, you can look at my phone and you can see that there was no engagement of any kind whatsoever with my phone. So the officer admits and accepts that he was not using his phone. So at that time, that officer's pullover was over. It was done. He was said, okay, well, you know, next time just, you know, keep it out of your hand, because it does look like you might be on the phone, and so we have to check it. But, you know, as a judge, I think probably he was offended. He expected that, you know, look, he's a judge. He's not going to break the law. You should expect that from him. He's a respectable judge. What's your problem? So he was defensive. Okay. But once he said, look, this is what I was doing, and the officer accepted it, the officer should have left. Okay. You know, all right then. But that's not what he did. Instead, what he did was he falsely accused him of screaming at him. And I'm going to demonstrate, so hold your ears if you don't want to hear this. Hey! That's screaming. There's yelling, which is a little bit under that amount of noise. But what I just demonstrated is screaming. Now, if this officer cannot have a calm conversation, this man calmly told him, even though he does look a little nervous or a little irritated, but he calmly told him what he was doing. If you're an officer of the law dealing with all kinds of calls, and you cannot have somebody calmly tell you what you're doing without believing that you're being screamed at, you have a severe mental illness, and you should not be on the force. Either that or you are corrupt. But officers do this all the time. And you will see this in all the videos, especially this channel I get, where this channel is got a double standard. They will announce that when an officer just accuses somebody of yelling or raising their voice or something like that, the channel will replay the video and show how he clearly did not yell at the officer. But when it came to this judge, he didn't do that. So I'm a little irritated with this channel. But now I'm going to play this video for you after he explains what he's doing.
Of the Moorfield Police Department.
Let me get back over here.
Williams pulled over, and Officer Johnson stopped his cruiser and began to walk towards the driver's side window.
I don't... Oh, okay. Okay, here we go.
Why did you stop me?
You got your cell phone in your hand.
I had my phone like this.
Yeah.
I just lost it. I was just looking for it. Pulled it up like this. Was not on it. I just looked in the... Go up and look.
Okay, why are you screaming at me?
Okay, right there. Why are you screaming at me? Does that sound like he was screaming at him? No. But you may think that that's trivial. Like that's just, oh, you know, that is something. By this officer saying that he was screaming at him when he wasn't. Let me tell you how influential an officer saying something like that about anybody. Can you imagine having an encounter with an officer and he puts in a report that you were screaming at him? Do you understand how that can manipulate a judge when somebody wants to, or a prosecutor when they want to get a charge against you? To say that he was screaming at you. And that is actually what ended up in the report. So this judge right here at this point, he gets really irritated. Okay, when he first introduces himself as a judge, that was wrong. But he said he wouldn't do anything wrong. He's like, I wasn't doing anything wrong. Well, he told him 3 times, just give him the ticket. If you're going to give him a ticket, he wanted to leave. Let him leave. And the officer wrongfully continued to detain them because he wanted to demand that he has no right to be irritated. Because he could see clear, if he saw what he was doing and he was really paying attention to what he was doing, he would have saw that his phone was facing that way, and he was just holding it. Even though that's reasonable, probable cause to pull him over, okay? The cop should have looked to see, is his mouth moving? Is he, what's he doing? But he just pulls over a judge and then falsely accuses him of screaming out. Now I'm going to show you how the report got wrote up. So this judge, I'm not going to play this video. I'll put the link in the description. But this channel spins it like this cop didn't do nothing wrong. And I'm just irritated with this channel, the double standard of how, he just for clicks and views, and so they just, it irritates me that they target his judge. Now let me show you what the charges ended up being. So what he did was, after he got on the call and he spoke about the officer in a disparaging way. He said, "Your boy," which people do that. I don't think that was really disparaging. He just said, he should have said "your officer," but they try to turn it a race thing because he said "your boy." I've seen other cases where they call me, stuff like that, like your guy, your boy. That wasn't racist, but he was defamed as a racist because he defended himself. When this officer, you need to listen to the video how this officer would not let him leave after he accepted that he was not on the phone. He should have just left and said, okay. He just kept going on and on and on, trying to provoke this judge. Why? What? I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you trying to say? Why? Like he wanted to make this guy out to be unprofessional to him, and he just wanted to leave. Like, give me the ticket, let me leave. So look at how this prosecutor writes this up. He either heard the cell phone ring or heard a rattle underneath his seat. He didn't say anything like that in the report. But that was deliberately written that way to present a narrative to make him look more guilty, to make him look like the officer had more probable cause. This is from how the officer wrote it. At some point, he could not locate his cell phone. He never lost his phone. He knew that it had slipped down between the door and his seat, and he reached down and got it and had it. No time did he lose his phone. No time did the phone ring. Okay, so that would be like him responding and made it like justified, right? But see how they do? Okay, so then let's go into more details. Okay, now this is true. He identified himself as the judge. That was not that's not appropriate. Okay, so instead of so he asked in angry tone why he had been stopped. Look what he says. At that point, Officer Johnson asked respondent why he was yelling. Actually, that's not what he said. He said, "Why are you screaming at me?" Instead of the prosecutor writing, "This is what the officer said," even though by reviewing the video, at no time was this officer, when he first said this to him, the judge was speaking to him calmly. At no time was he yelling. So can you imagine by the time this gets to the judicial, commission hearing, this makes him sound like a psycho. They railroaded this judge because this prosecutor's crooked. This prosecutor wrote this. And he reviewed the video, and he knows he wasn't yelling. He knows this officer committed a crime of falsely accusing this judge of a crime. So you understand. When officers are screamed at, if somebody is screaming at an officer, they often arrest them for disorderly conduct. You can see so many videos out there. There was a guy who was screaming at an officer on the street, and they made a big to-hoo about it because he arrested him, right? So they do arrest people. They do arrest people for screaming at officers. It's called disorderly conduct. They can. It's a discretion officer. So in essence, he falsely accused a sitting judge of a crime. And so this judge was hot. He was so mad. He went and demanded discipline of this officer. And that was his right to do so. And not only was his right to do so, it was his duty to do so, because he has a duty to report when he witnesses an officer commit a crime. He should have taken it to somebody to complain for him. He should have gotten an attorney and presented the evidence, and that would have been the best thing for him to do, so it wouldn't be making him end up looking like this, like, he's doing all. He should have got an attorney to got the body cam and got the evidence to show how this officer targeted him and lied on him and falsely accused him. When he pulled him over for something like the cell phone, after he told him and the officer accepted that he had not violated the statute about holding it, and he would not let him go, that was evidence there that this was a mission to pull this judge over for whatever they possibly can find to pull him over for, and we're going to get this guy off the bench. And this prosecutor is dangerous. This officer is dangerous. Go ahead and, deal with this judge if he acts in any way unprofessional. Deal with that. Hold him to the standard. But by golly, don't you dare ignore the crime of falsely reporting in a report to judiciary hearing. I'm personally going to gather support, and I'm going to write a bar association complaint against this prosecutor for ignoring the crime of this officer and falsely reporting this to a judiciary hearing. Okay? To increase and exaggerate the seriousness of his behavior. Okay? Now this judge, what's he gonna do? They done got the social media running and rolling. Okay? What's he gonna do? If he wants to keep his job, he better play the game. He better apologize, and he did. He apologized for being rude to him, which he was. And some of the things he did, he was wrong. When he announced himself as a judge, when he addressed him, that was not necessarily disrespectful to the officer, but it wasn't appropriate according to canon ethics. However, when he told this officer, "Look, I'm not doing anything. I didn't do anything," and then the officer accepted that he had not violated by just holding it, because if you read the statute, it says holding the phone while engaging in texting or gaming or talking. So it's like the judge pointed out. I said, well, there's nothing wrong with holding the phone. Like if you're holding a cup and getting a drink, momentarily. He was just transferring from one hand to his left to his right, and then he was going to set it over there and falling between his seat. I mean, people do that all the time. Okay, so let me go on and, okay, so he omits that the officer falsely accused him of screaming. He omits that this officer, after he accepted that he was only holding it, but see how they wrote it, it was like he heard it ringing, like he was literally trying to answer the phone. And at no time did this judge say it was ringing. And no time did he say he heard it. He said it just fell between his seat. They made up lies. This prosecutor lied. He lied. How many people are sitting in jail because there's crooked prosecutors in office? How many people are sitting in jail because this officer is a liar? Lied to let me think. If an officer will boldly lie to a sitting judge's face and falsely accuse him of crime of screaming at an officer, which is disorderly conduct, you better know he knows he's protected. And you better know he's out there lying on a whole lot of people. And this judge is not playing their game, so they're going to get rid of him. They targeted this judge, okay? And unfortunately, his license was expired. But that's the next thing that they did, which was so, oh my gosh, so deceptive. So then, okay, after... Yeah, he tells him to give him a ticket. But instead of saying, he asked the officer 4 times to give him a ticket, and instead of the officer giving him a ticket and then leaving, the officer continued to try to argue with the judge, because that's what's happened. So this prosecutor is crooked. He just wrote it up all kinds of lying ways. Okay, so here's the respondent's license expired. Did the officer tell him, you cannot drive because your license is expired? No. He told him he could leave and said, just go get it, updated. But look how the prosecutor writes it up. He writes it up as if he was committing a crime by continuing to drive after he left. The officer learned the respondent's license had expired, which occurred on April 7, 2021. Okay, respondent drove off without waiting for the officer to release him. That's not true. You can watch the video. That is not even true. He handed him his stuff and he was done. Okay, so they make stuff up, but then when he says stuff about him leaving, when he left, as if he drove off with an expired license and continued to commit a crime of driving without a license. But that's not true. Officers all the time, if your tail light is broken or if your registration's expired, if they tell you that you can leave and go get it fixed, that is giving you permission to get it corrected. They falsely accused this judge of driving off with an expired license without permission, and that is not what happened. So here's what happened to the judge with how they wrote up all these lies on this judge. Here we go. So he got a 1 year suspended stay. His 1 year suspension was stayed pending probation of JLLP. So he can continue to operate, but he's on probation, which is actually pretty harsh. You know, a lot of people may think that's a slap on the wrist or whatever. But here's my thing. Okay, if you want to go after a judge for improper contact, do it honestly. Don't lie. Don't use lies. And most certainly do not make a cop out to be a saint who committed crimes. This judge is a victim of crimes. He's a victim of perjury that they committed against him. He's a victim of this officer bold-facedly lying to him, saying, "Why are you screaming at me?" when he very calmly responded to him. When, you know, he wasn't perfect, he wasn't a saint, but he went into authorities to get this officer disciplined because he lied on him. But they made it out like his going to authorities was trying to get special treatment. I'm sorry. If he had asked for special treatment to be allowed to get by with a crime, that's asking for favors. But when you're a judge or an official and you go to somebody and you demand discipline of an officer or you complain on an officer, that's your right. So they stripped this judge of his rights to be treated fairly by officers when this officer's committed a crime against him. And this officer is going around. You know darn well if he lied on this judge, you know darn well there are people sitting in jail on his lies. So, yeah, that's how I feel about this. And then what are people going to do when they keep sheeple listening to these channels that spin this? You know, it's okay for them to say, hey, this judge was not acting appropriate when he's being pulled over. But if you're going to be a double standard human being and ignore what the cop did, to me, I feel like, you know, the judge was unprofessional, but I feel like that cop and that prosecutor, how they omitted things and lied and added things and manipulated things in a very misrepresenting and a very misleading way. When you write reports as an authority and you knowingly mislead, omit, and misrepresent, that is perjury. Okay? And so that same prosecutor is held to the standards of attorney bar ethics. And that police department and that prosecutor are corrupt. And that's why they don't like this judge. Okay? They want him out. And they worked hard. They campaigned hard against this guy. They pulled him over. And they already had their mind made up. And he fell into the bait. He allowed himself to be irritated and reacted. And he should have contacted an attorney to go make these complaints instead of doing it himself. Because if he had had an attorney to represent him, to say, hey, this judge was treated unfairly, he was lied on, he was misrepresented by a police officer, and we believe he is being targeted by the police department as a judge, and this is professional misconduct by police department. That was the way he should have gone. But he reacted, knee-jerk reaction, and he just didn't think it through. He should have hired an attorney, even though he's a judge. Judges still need attorneys. He should have done that. That's what he should have done. He should have hired an attorney. And I guarantee if he had done that, and then an attorney say, oh, yeah, I see this video. This guy is straightaway lying on you. Yeah, you're being targeted, dude. You better. And then his attorney could have wrote a cease and desist letter to the police department that you need to cease and desist allowing your officers to lie on a judge in his face because you are targeting a sitting bench judge. Okay? You're targeting a circuit judge. And I guarantee you that would have been the better way to go. But unfortunately, you know, it just went south. But this is how they use the media. And you know what really makes me angry? It's because I live in an area that has a lot of racism in it. And I hate racism. And I hate it when people play the race card. And it's so bad. It's so bad in our country. The state I live in, we had a county commissioner and some officials who literally were caught by a journalist, left a recording device, suspecting that they were having illegal meetings, and they were talking about lynching black people, or burying them, or doing. I mean, it was just horrific. That goes on in 2023. That happened this year in Oklahoma. Okay, so racism is real. So I don't like for politics when they want for some own agenda and mission to use this like this on some minor irritation of this judge, okay, and really spin this in such a deceptive way, because this judge is not playing their game, and they know it, and they're going to get rid of him. But thankfully it didn't work. It didn't work. He did get, you know, a little kick in the butt, but it didn't work. Okay. And we need to pray for our judges to truly get rid of corrupt judges, but we need to pray that all those that are attacking those in the deceptive ways, these prosecutors, we need laws that hold prosecutors, make it criminal. If they do like this report here, knowing that they've reviewed the videos in this hearing, I don't know if the person who reviewed the evidence, I don't know if they listened to these videos, but if they listen to these videos, that's an even bigger problem, because how can they not hear what this officer did by accusing him of screaming at him when he was calmly talking to him, even though he was a little nervous? Oh my gosh, I'm telling you now, there's so many people sitting in jail. Police lie all the time, and we've got to stand up. We've got to stand up against this police, and even when they lie on judges. So that's my spill of the deal, and I just appreciate your feedback, and please share this. Thank you.